So there are some amazing creators out there, right? Writers, artists, musicians. They create things that are just seem like beyond comprehension at times. And oftentimes we wonder, well, how did they get there? Well, there are a lot of different ways that they got there. A lot of it was practice, practice, practice. But here is a simple strategy that will enable you to kind of get into their mind and develop a mindset, an understanding of how they create, their creation process, their creativity recipe, all right? So that you can start implementing this in your own life. I call it the mastery brain transplant. So that's exactly what it is. It's the idea of taking their awesomeness as the skill that they have developed and transferring it to you so that you can do something very similar, maybe even better. That may be a possibility. So what's the process here? Well, the idea is outlined here under how. Pick a skill that you want to learn or improve. What is that? Is that writing? Is it copywriting? Is it regular writing? Is it standing in front of the camera? Is it writing a song? Is it doing artwork? Is it drawing? What is it for you? Is it singing? Figure out the skill that you want to master. And then 2, find an outstanding example of this skill. I'm a big Beatles fan. And so if I were to want to learn how to play bass, I don't because I play guitar, but if I wanted to learn to play bass, guess what? I would pick Paul McCartney probably as my master example of somebody I want to copy. Now, I know there are going to be people out there who say, well, Paul McCartney is not really the best bassist ever. You know, I don't care. That's who I see as one of the best bassists ever. I find his bass lines amazing. So you've got the skill that you want to develop. You've got an example of a master who does it. What's the third point? Pick out something and copy it precisely as possible, every detail. Okay, so take a song that Paul McCartney put together, that he wrote, that he is playing bass on, and break it down piece by piece. And here, seek to discover the creative recipe, how it was made, tools that were used, and the reason behind the creator's choices. So if I were to do something as far as trying to master Paul McCartney and his bass playing, I would take a song like Taxman. If you've never heard it, go look it up, and find out how he played that bass line. Practice it, practice it, practice it over and over again until you get that bass line, that particular bass line mastered. Find out how he did subtle nuances in his playing, why he chose the notes that he did, the sound that he was able to achieve by the recording that was made. All right? Figure out the little details. Figure out the creative recipe that he had to have in his mind and his emotions, his body, in order to create that. And you will discover that by copying what he did as closely as you possibly can. Another example would be if you are trying to be a copywriter. That's another thing that I find interesting, is if you want to be a good copywriter or even just a general writer. Now, a copywriter is somebody that uses words to persuade others, okay? Now, if you wanted to become a good copywriter, one of the best things that you could do is find a master of that skill and then take their marketing, their copywriting, and just write it out hand by hand, and every period, every comma, every word, and just write it out as exactly as they wrote it out as possible. And when you do this, you're going to get an understanding of how they did the process, their thought process, the emotions that they were feeling, because you're living it by practicing it and replicating it. It's an amazing process when you put it into action. So figure out how to do that. Copy every detail as you possibly can. Now, here's the number one roadblock. The number one roadblock is overwhelm from complexity. So again, if you go into Paul McCartney, that might be a little bit of a complex process to really figure out how he played Taxman and try to replicate it as closely as possible, or world-class copywriter. But what you want to do is don't get overwhelmed by the complexity, but what you want to do is start small. Choose simple examples first. So even with the example of Paul McCartney and him playing bass, and I keep going back to that, but it could be any skill: drawing, writing, singing, anything that you want to do, running, playing another instrument, building something. It doesn't matter. Start small. Don't try to Look at the big picture. Try to figure out how they did little small sections first. Build on each section one at a time until you have the complete picture, the complete process, and you've replicated the entire thing that they built, that they created, that they sang, that they made, and do it at small little chunks. Now, why? Well, again, as it mentions there under the why, it's like a creativity brain transplant when you do this. You see, think, and feel like the original creator. You have to have your mind working in similar ways that they did when they're creating it, when you're replicating it. And you feel what they felt in a lot of ways. Maybe not exactly, but that's not the point. The point is to do it close enough. And as a result, you install their creative process in your mind. It becomes almost intuitive how you see how it works and the subtleties that you develop from going through this process. And it really is and feels like a mastery brain transplant. So figure out how to do this, practice it, try it on something that you enjoy doing, that you're trying to pick up right now, and see what happens. All right? I hope you found this useful and helpful. And if you did, please like, comment, and share below. I'd appreciate it. And then comment maybe how you are using this particular strategy to develop your skills as a master in your craft, whatever that may be. And maybe share some examples of how you're doing this. All right? Love to hear from you. So have an amazing day.